Welcome to the FBAA's Top Broker Podcast for mortgage brokers looking to take their business to the next level.
Hey guys, and welcome to the Top Broker Podcast. Jaden here. Today we've got a really special guest. We've got the one, the only Peter Switzer, who you know from Sky Business, online. He's a huge commentator out there and actually attended the FBAA conference last year as one of the keynote speakers. We're really lucky to have Peter in today. It's going to be a two-part episode. In the first part, we're going to be talking about the Royal Commission, something that I know you guys are really familiar about. But Peter's going to take us through on his take of the Royal Commission, what he sees as, obviously the issues and the holes in it, but also some really key lessons that he picked up after similar changes went through with the financial planning industry. And he had a business, and he still has a financial planning business in there, and the FOFA, or the Future of Financial Planning Act, went in a couple of years ago and did completely remove commission. So Peter has some awesome lessons in there. I know you're going to get a lot of takeaways. That's the first part. And then next week, we're going to come back with a couple of lessons from it. But anyway, before we get to that, let's go with the first part. And without any further ado, let's get talking to Peter Switzer. Peter, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining us.
Great pleasure.
So I guess starting with the top and something quite topical, the Royal Commission, you've written about it a lot lately. What's your sort of take on it, your view? You've been pretty vocal about it, and what does it mean for brokers, really?
Well, I'm vocal about it because, generally I think that the Royal Commission got it right. They analysed what's wrong with the financial services industry, and they were able to identify some really bad behaviour and, a lot of bad behaviour really, and stuff that has been ignored by not only the upper echelons of executives in these companies, but as well their boards as well, and successive governments over a long period of time have really let consumers down, and they've been asleep at the wheel. And I've got to say, I partly understand why, because the industry has, various industries have been really, really tough on any politician who really wanted to reform industries. I remember doing a speech at Jupiter's on the Gold Coast when Joe Hockey was finance minister. He wasn't treasurer. He was finance minister, and he was trying to reform the processes in the insurance broking industry. And some of the reforms he was putting forward resulted in them effectively booing him off the stage.
Wow. Which
I thought was great for me, because I followed after him, and they loved everything I had to say. But there isn't a great receptivity from various financial groups when it comes to reform. But the kind of reforms that Justice Hayne in the Royal Commission wants to impose upon mortgage brokers is not only, I think, draconian and unfair to mortgage brokers who are, primarily small business owners, but unfair to consumers as well, because, the most logical conclusion of what he suggested was that mortgage brokers would have to charge a fee to provide a service. And most consumers then would say, well, I'm not going to pay that fee, and I'll give the banks a try. And so, in effect, effectively, he's driving people back to the banks. And that means that the people who frame these recommendations really don't understand the history and the contribution that mortgage brokers have made to the loan market of Australia since the early 1990s. And to make those suggestions not only shows that they don't appreciate the history of what mortgage brokers have contributed as a group, but also I think he's out of touch with community expectations, because, as I say, I don't think the community, and especially first-time buyers, would love the idea of paying upfront commission and then hoping that they get a really, really good job out of it, And it just, as I say, it was out of touch with community expectations. And despite the fact I think he got it right in so many other areas, but this one was totally way out, and that's why I went for it and criticised it substantially.
Well, and I think that's one thing the industry probably missed, and even a few brokers who have gotten a bit vocal out there haven't have thought about it from their own perspective, understandably, because they're business owners and, we've got overheads and everything else there. So I get that. But one thing that I think the industry bodies have sort of realized a bit late, but was from the consumer perspective. And I know, even you're a consumer and you've used brokers in the past and used the banks in the past. So even from a consumer perspective, like what do you think is the best way we should be positioning it to customers? Is it that choice? Is it talking about in the early 90s where there was no competition? From a consumer perspective, what does it mean, I guess?
Well, look, I think the strength of a mortgage broker is that he or she will do the work that most consumers won't do. And it's either because they are exceptionally busy doing what they do in their area of speciality, or they're not academically or mentally equipped or inclined to do the kind of homework, which we know the answers are there. The comparison websites nowadays tell you what's out there, but you still got to do a lot of work, and you've got to jump through the hoops, and you've got the people who can get these online loans at really low rates invariably have jobs as secure as public servants. They have very little debt, so they just pass the online test so easily they get it. But we know the average borrower is complicated, like life. Life is complicated. And that's why I think the services that a mortgage broker brings to the table is that they take the chaos, they take the difficulty out of that sort of work. And if someone is prepared to in inverted commas, pay for it and effectively not pay for it, because it's an upfront commission paid by a bank and a trailing commission, well, then I just can't see why the Royal Commission got so hot under the collar. And I suspect part of the reason is that they might have taken a couple of stories of people who were mistreated by mortgage brokers and have presumed that this is just like something that happens on a pretty regular basis. But the actual history of complaints against mortgage brokers is really small. And if it was really large, I'd be saying, yeah, things have to change. But they are really small. And as a consequence, I just think that it's the old saying, if it ain't broke, why try and fix it? And I think the only thing that really needs to be put across all financial services, and remember, I have a financial planning business, and we also, do provide Switzer home loans. So I'm in competition with brokers in many ways. But the only thing all financial services has needed for a long, long time is effectively a financial industry consumer claims tribunal, which actually now is in place, but the government is still not really marketing it, and that's called FCAR. And I think a lot of practitioners would know it, but a lot of consumers don't know about it. If FCAR and something like it was in place, say, 10 years ago, all these complainants who turn up to the Royal Commission would have had their day in arbitration.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the CEOs of all these financial institutions would look and say, hey, we just lost $500 million last year, and we better do something about this. So it has been a failure of government in particular to not have something like that in place. And now there's going for what I think is a second-rate solution for mortgage broking.
No, well, and sort of you touched on it before, your financial planning business, and you've been through this. I think you've had that business for a number of years, and obviously with FOFA that came through the industry, it was a similar change where commissions were supposed to be banned, and it looks like that's going to get sort of corrected, I guess, or done as part of the Royal Commission. How did your business find that change back in those days from commissions to fee for service, and what was that transition like?
Well, I've got to say, we had absolutely no effect, because when I started my business, working in the media, I knew the kinds of bad practices that were prevailing in financial planning. It's part of the reason why I started the business, because people would come to me and ask me to do their financial plans. I said, well, I'm not a qualified financial planner, albeit most financial planners read my material and my explanations and that sort of stuff. I'm an educator of financial planners, but I wasn't a financial planner. And I was referring people to other businesses, and I started to realise that I was referring people because I might have liked the principle, who owned the place, but I didn't know what his employees were doing. So we decided to go into financial planning in the early 2000s. And I was the complete opposite of just about every financial planner. We rebated commissions, we charged flat dollar fees, and we even tried to rebate insurance commissions, but insurance companies made it so hard it was nearly impossible. So we had to basically accept the commission and then share it back or take it off the price we offered the consumer. So FOFA, in fact, was a bit of an annoyance, really, because it made my rivals who were behaving really badly, they made them a little bit more honest. So
there you go.
It made them a little bit more competitive to me. But so that was. But I look seriously. I just did not think that the level of criminality in inverted commas in the mortgage broking industry is so bad. And I know a lot of mortgage brokers. I know them are sort of mavericks and larrikins or whatever. But the fact that the banks review most loan applications, or all loan applications,
and audit them,
in a sense they're accessories after the fact, and in many ways, given what mortgage brokers did, banks were accessories before the fact.
Well, I hope you guys had a notepad. I took heaps out of that episode. Peter, thank you so much for your time. Yeah, I find it interesting that his experience with the FOFA changes, obviously around his financial planning business, is pretty similar to what we're going through. And let's hope by the time it gets through, it's going to get watered down, or it might just be upfronts. But I think the reality is the way Peter dealt with it in his business is the way that we probably need to look at it. And the way he did that was through education. So I guess my question is, how are you educating your clients? What are you doing extra? Peter does his media and the marketing. How can you help your customers not just get the loan, but potentially look at paying it down, or even the buying process? What else are you doing there? So I think that was a huge takeaway that I really took out of that first part. But that's only part one. So next week, we're going to come back to it. We're going to look at how to deal with this change. And Peter takes us through a couple of really insanely practical tips that you can apply in your business today to help move forward and deal with this change. So if you want to hit Peter up and see his stuff, check out Switzer Daily online. You can also follow him on Twitter, and he's on Facebook and everything else, Peter Switzer. Peter, thank you so much again for your time. If you guys have got any feedback, hit us up at topbroker.com.au. And if you like the episode, give us a thumbs up or leave a review on iTunes or wherever you listen to your podcast. But that's it for this week, guys. Have an awesome week and look forward to tuning in and seeing you next time. Until then, see you later.